Angela here. I want to cover today 5 tips that you can use for more effective communication. Let's just jump right into it. Number 1 is shut up and listen. So often we are thinking about what we're going to say while the other person is talking. You know you've done it. We've all done it. And it should go without saying, and yet I'm going to say it anyway. One of the best number 1 first things that we can all do to improve our communication is to really listen to each other. And actually that goes beyond just shutting up and listening. It actually has to do with really genuinely suspending your disbelief and being interested in what the other person is trying to tell you, even if they're not articulating it perfectly. Thinking about what they're really trying to say, I think, is a really good way to improve your communication. And number 2, along with that, is to ask better questions. I think very often we assume that somebody else knows what we want to know, or assume that they're going to answer our questions, and we don't really ask, and then we get frustrated when we don't get an answer. So asking better questions, and that's kind of a lifelong art form. I think some people are really good at it and some of us not so much. Tim Ferriss is somebody I look to as a great mentor for asking good questions of myself, especially with regard to business, but also with interpersonal relationships. And I think those kind of questions are handy to ask other people too when you're trying to really find out what they're really trying to communicate to you, or what their needs really are. If you're negotiating in business or in relationships, a lot of it comes down to negotiation of some sort or another for us to all get what we want. And that is made more effective by asking good questions and listening. And number 3 is to clarify what you think you heard, repeating back. It's kind of an age-old technique. I don't know if it's age-old, but as long as I've been around, which is practically as long as time at this point, people have been aware, like if you take a class in communication or some relationship therapy, you are likely to be instructed to repeat back what you heard in your own words to the person saying it to you, especially when things are difficult to understand, or you're getting, you're trying to communicate over a topic where there's a big gap between the two people's, or however many people's, understanding. It's a really good idea to repeat back what you think you heard in your own words, and then let the other person clarify if that's what they meant or not. This can be a lengthy process. It's not appropriate in all circumstances, but it is really appropriate when 2 parties have agreed that they want to improve their communication or make it more effective, and they're having some trouble communicating effectively. Then repeating back to the other person what you think you heard in your own words, and then letting them respond, not just insisting this is what you said, but saying, here's what I think I'm hearing you say, and then letting them respond, and really, again, shutting up and listening and trying to pay attention to their micro expressions and whether or not you're really understanding what the other person is trying to say. Because I guarantee you, if you want to be understood, the best path to being understood more is to try to understand others more. As you understand others more, you will understand yourself more, and also you will learn how to more effectively communicate yourself to others, and others will be more interested in you naturally because you're more interested in them. It's how it works. Like attracts like. So if you want to communicate more effectively, learn to listen better and understand better. If you want to be understood more, learn to understand better. Number 4 is to mirror that person's style. Again, this can be overdone. It's not entirely appropriate in all circumstances, but to some extent it is. And if you can really hone in on what a person's learning style is, and then match that style, or even their rhythm, their cadence, their gaze sometimes, the more mirroring you can do without the person feeling like you're copying them or mocking them, which is never a good thing. But if you can key in, if a person's learning style, for example, is visual, a lot of times they'll use phrases like, I see that, or I don't see that, or I don't see what this has to do with that, or I see how this is related. And if they're using visual words, cues, then that's a good visual cue words. That's a good cue that their learning style is visual. And if you in turn use similar language in your communication, you're going to find more ease. And that has to do with the rhythm, the cadence. If somebody talks really slow or really fast, if you can match that rhythm, you're going to find your communication much more effective. Of course, language too. Like if somebody uses a lot of slang or a lot of very proper language, mirroring that can often put that person at ease and just relax your communication instead of creating an effort to like translate between even simple little societal differences, cultural differences in terminology can make a big difference. So mirroring, kind of paying attention to what that person's style is, what their learning style is. If it's auditory, they might use things like that sounds good or I hear you. Or if it's kinesthetic, they might say I feel you or I'm feeling that. Pay attention to those subtle cues and do your best to match them without mocking them or without making them feel like you're copying them, but just to put that person at ease and make the communication flow all that much more easy. Much more easier. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, that's number 4, mirror. Pay attention to and then mirror their learning style and their patterns and their speed of communication and other little nuances. And then number 5, last but not least, is think about the desired outcome that you want from the communication. I think this is often overlooked when people communicate. You might just think you want to be right or you want to be heard or you want to be understood. But if you really think about it, you might be trying to change somebody's mind, or you might be trying to get somebody to invest in your idea, or you might be trying to get somebody to hire you for a position, or you might be trying to get somebody to see your point of view or listen to your song. Whatever it is that your outcome is that you're looking for, if you kind of work backwards from that and think about what outcome do I really want from this communication? Do I just want to be heard? Do I want to hear the other person? Do I want to have a transaction or something happen at the end of this communication? Am I negotiating for someone's life? All those questions and answers to those questions are gonna, if you think about them, are gonna maybe color impact your communication style and what would be most effective and efficient way for you to communicate. I think very often, especially in interpersonal relationships, we get stuck on just being heard or just being right, and we completely forget our objective, which is to be closer to the person, to spend quality time with the person, to get to know the person, or for that person to get to know us, for us to be able to share positive time together. Often that gets wrecked by trying to communicate or having miscommunication. It's fascinating to me. Whereas if we just step back a little bit and kept in mind, what's the object of this communication? And if it's to enjoy each other's company or to bring ourselves closer or to bring more understanding, then as soon as you see that it's not going that way, back up, pause, take another run at it in a different direction, make a little adjustment, see what you can do to improve that. Don't just force your way forward in your communication, which often people do by yelling, raising their voice, and that pretty much never ever works for effective communication. I hope those tips are helpful to you. Long ago, I took some classes in communication, and I was just recalling them. I'm certainly no expert, but I do pride myself in trying. And if you found some value in those 5 tips, or if you have another tip or 2 that you would like to add so that we can all learn from what you know about effective communication, I would love to hear it. I'm going to recap real quick those 5 ways were shut up and listen, and also really listen, really pay attention to what the person is trying to say, not just what they're actually saying. Think about what they are trying to communicate, what they want out of the interaction. And number 2, ask better questions of yourself and others. Stop with the how you doings and the what's ups. If you really want to communicate effectively, throw in a little personal detail like, how are you liking that new job? Or, gosh, where'd you get those kick-ass boots? Whatever it is, like throw in a little personal detail and you'll find that those, make your questions better, and you'll find that your communication improves vastly. Number 3 is to clarify what you think you heard, especially if things are tough or communication is tricky, and especially when both parties agree that they're trying to have effective communication. It can be a really great tool to repeat back in your own words what you think you heard the other person say, and then have them verify or clarify or disagree with what you think you heard. And through that lengthy process, it can be painful and lengthy, but it can be really effective for communicating in a tough area where people really want to communicate. And number 4, mirror their style, their learning style, their speed, their patterns, their speech, their social style. The more of that you can get in sync with and mirror, the more comfortable you're going to make the people or person that you're communicating with, and the more easy that flow is going to happen. And number 5, think about the desired outcome that you want in the end. Think about what is the reason you're communicating with them. If it's to create conflict, by all means, then create conflict. If it's to get along, create alliance, then keep that in mind. And as soon as you get off that course, bring it back on course. Think about what you really want, the outcome. What's your desired outcome for your communication? And if you can keep that in mind as you communicate, you're going to find your communication much more effective. That's 5 tips that I have. I hope they're helpful. I hope you will subscribe and share if they were. Till next time, peace, prosperity, possibilities, and positivity.